Hey everybody, this is Rob Keens with the Freedom Report, and I have I guess, a returning guest to the program. It's been about 3 years, John. John Adams, Managing Director of ABC Bullion. Welcome to the program. How are you doing today, sir?
Thank you, Rob. It has been 3 years. I think we last spoke on your channel back in 2021, and then I went dark for a long period of time, but now I've resurfaced, and it's now time to tell your viewers and the world about what I've been up to and why it's important to gold and silver investors.
Yeah, and when you first started doing this, I don't know if you realized how long it was going to take you to do it. I know we talked a little bit about that off screen, about the level of effort needed to do the type of investigation you did. And I will just say this, having been an auditor and stuff, it's difficult when you have direct access because people don't necessarily want to tell you the truth. But when you don't have direct access, it can be very challenging. And what you did really was go above and beyond, I think, what a lot of people probably would have done in your situation. And to do that, I mean, you really had to kind of take a deep dive, work on this for a period of time. So I don't want to give away the story. I'll let you do that. But tell the listeners what you've been doing in the last few years, what you found out, and let's just kind of jump into the middle of it.
Sure. So just to take us back to 2021, Rob. I mean, obviously in February of 2021 we had silver squeeze, and you covered that quite extensively. And then in March of 2021, I mean, in this period of February, March 2021, there was rumors circulating from customers of Perth Mint that their gold, that their silver, particularly in pool and unallocated accounts, was not being delivered within the contractual time frame, which on their website they basically said it would be about 10 business days. So in around the 20th of March 2021, I went public on Twitter and basically said that the Perth Mint was in default. Within 2 weeks, that I think had about 365,000 impressions across the world, with Wall Street Silver picking that up. And then for about a 6-7 week period, unallocated, pull allocated accounts was the talk of the global industry. And then in 2021, you and Daniel Vigario did a range of independent analysis on the Perth Mint. And you went through their accounts, and you did some really good content. And I applaud you for all of the investigation work that you and Daniel did on the Perth Mint. And I mean, during that period of 2021, the CEO of the Perth Mint was Richard Hayes, and he was defending his leadership in the operation of the Mint. And by 2021, he was thrown out by the board, and the Western Australian government brought in a seasoned public servant who had no history in the precious metal space, and the Perth Mint has been on a bit of a recovery process over the last couple of years. Now, the key thing around this period of time of February and March of 2021 is that there was a woman on the south coast of New South Wales who went public on Wall Street Silver. She went by the name of Julie G. Silver, and she made some allegations against ABC Bullion, which is the largest domestic dealer in Australia, bigger than the Perth Mint. I mean, Perth Mint has a lot of foreign clients, but in terms of its domestic customer base, ABC Bullion is known to be the biggest. She had specific silver bars in not unallocated, pull allocated, but allocated. So basically in storage where it's her legal property, and she's paying storage fees. She's receiving documentation from ABC Bullion saying that her property was in storage. And in early February of 2021, she was listening to me and you and others on social media, and we keep on drumming the beat to say, if you don't hold it, you don't own it. So she thought it'd be a wise, prudent move to redeem her metal from ABC Bullion, and she was faced with a number of delays. And then in mid-March of 2021, she received a phone call, and the phone call was, "We don't have your silver," and that triggered her to go public on social media. That caused a firestorm. I was tweeting about it. Other people were tweeting about it, and so during this period of time, Perth Mint, Kitco, ABC Bullion, these were the talk of the industry at the time. Now, fast forward 2 weeks after this woman went public, I had a dinner in Sydney with who was then an ABC Bullion employee, and we were talking about all these issues that were on social media. And it was a very interesting conversation, Rob. Basically, I knew this person for a while. He seemed very uneasy and very uncomfortable as the dinner was going ahead. And I kept on saying to this person, "Are you okay? Seems like you want to say something. What's going on?" And Rob, it literally took me an hour until he basically came out and said that ABC Bullion, in his view, again, not my conspiracy theory, not my defamatory allegation. This is a ABC Bullion employee who was then an employee at the time, said that ABC Bullion was running a fractional reserve allocated scheme, that this scheme had been in operation for at least a decade. It was well known within the headquarters. And basically, this person was a frontline salesperson talking to customers as they called in ABC Bullion. And he basically said he was systematically lying to customers, and he was required to do so as part of his employment. So it was an extraordinary story. It was an extraordinary allegation that this person put to me. And so when I looked at what happened to this woman, when I hear this employee make these sort of allegations, but also one of the other big things that happened was once this woman went public. So ABC Bullion's website in early of March of 2021 said that if you want to redeem your medal, we'll give it in 48 hours. And by April of 2021, they suddenly changed the website with no public announcement, no notification to investors. They didn't even tell their own employees. They just changed the website and say it's now going to take 10 business days to redeem your medal. And I'm thinking to myself, well, hang on, why would you need an extra 8 days if the storage program is legitimate and intact? So these factors led me to believe that if there is a scandal of this magnitude, someone has to do something about it. And so I decided to actually turn myself into an investigator. So, I'm 43 now. I started economics when I was 16. So, macroeconomics, politics. I've used to work in federal parliament. I've done the management consulting at EY, very similar to you doing auditing at EY. So I've done all that sort of stuff. But what I can say, Rob, is by 2021, I had really no knowledge of the law. Didn't understand what evidence was, didn't know how to run an investigation, how to put an evidence file together. And so in the course of 10 months, I had to learn about how to run an investigation. I had to learn about the regulator, ASIC, the Australian Securities and Investments Commission, because that's what my lawyer said, this is where I should take this allegation. But then I had to go compile the evidence and chase down this story that this employee said to me to see if it was real or not. And we had a smoking gun piece of evidence, and the smoking gun was a secret WhatsApp group of 7 and current former ABC Bullion employees. And in this period of March and April of 2021, when this woman went public, and you and I are tweeting about the Perth Mint, etc., that these 7 employees basically confessed to fraud. And there's one person who makes most of the admissions, and that person is the former 2IC of ABC Bullion, a guy called John Feeney, who's still in the industry. And he basically said that they are providing a service, the people are paying for a service they're not providing. He used the word fraud in his own words, that the company that he used to work for, that he was the second in charge, they were committing fraud. We have 70 pages of this extended conversation over 3 weeks, and just the admissions by these 7 employees is just unbelievable. So I thought to myself, you shouldn't be seeing employees at a major company talk like this. And so that, again, gave me confidence that there's something to this. But, as I was chasing down this rabbit hole of, well, where is the gold and silver? Where is the storage program? Because one of the things that ABC Bullion did for a very long time, they said to customers, you cannot see the bullion. Sorry, you cannot see the vault. They use reasons of confidentiality, security, privacy. You can't see it. If you want your medal, come to the store. We'll give you the medal, but you can't check you can't look at our facility. We're not going to give you any photos. You just have to take us on trust. And so there was no transparency about this program whatsoever. And it sort of obviously just scratched my head as to, well, what was really going on. And so as I was developing my investigation, I was trying to find other points of evidence to see whether it actually aligns with what this whistleblower in this WhatsApp chat is saying, or could I actually solve the mystery of where the bullion was without having to go to law enforcement. And one of the techniques I did was I hired private investigators in 2021. I wrote a number of scripts. I basically said to the investigators, you are to call ABC Bullion up on 4 different days. I want you to talk to 4 different employees, and I want you to run through each of these scripts. Some of the questions were designed to help get the conversation started. Some of the questions were highlighted in yellow, and I said, these are the questions you must ask if I'm going to pay you. And after these discussions, I want a transcript. And the basic question is, well, where is the vault? Where is the storage? How can I see it? And 4 different phone calls in a big way, 4 different answers. And you know, the inconsistency, and obviously you being an auditor, you can understand that if you're auditing financial accounts or in terms of a business or an operation, and you're getting employees giving you very different answers about sensitive information within the company, well, that's inconsistent information is a bit of a red flag. And so just to give you one example, so one employee who was actually a part of this group chat, who was part of the confession of the fraud, when she was asked by an undercover investigator, where's the vault, where's the bullion, she basically said it's actually at our Sydney office. Now, I knew that was false because I knew the layout of the Sydney office. I had whistleblowers telling me that there's no storage at the Sydney office. But the other sort of thing that was so obvious is, if the storage was actually at the headquarters, why do you need 10 days to retrieve the medal? Makes no sense. If it's actually at the actual office, you know, 10, 20 minutes, go into the vault at the office, retrieve the client medal, and Bob's your uncle is there. So massive red flags all over the place. And so we went to ASIC in April of 2022 with a 608-page file of evidence signed off by my barrister. And you know, when you this is the other sort of interesting aspect of this, Rob, is that when you deal with lawyers and barristers, you know, they require a standard of evidence and a standard of professionalism and quality before they're prepared to commit their name to it. So, you know, the effort and the time to collate the evidence and to put the case theory together, it had to be done in a professional way if I was going to get, you know, professional lawyers and barristers to put their signature to stuff before I went to ASIC. Now, the key issue about ASIC is the chances of someone like me walking off the street, going to law enforcement, the corporate regulator, and saying, I want a criminal investigation, the chances are 0.36%. It is it's almost near impossible to get an investigation into a corporation in Australia. And so, but I was able to pull it off, and there was an investigation. Now, before we talk about what happened in the ASIC investigation, having listened to you and others in the United States, I was very conscious of what happened with Andrew Maguire in the period of 2011, 2012. So Andrew Maguire went to the Department of Justice to blow the whistle on JP Morgan about manipulation in the trading market, spoofing, and things of that nature. And then the CFTC obviously then commenced an investigation. There was congressional hearings. I think Gatto testified, you know, the former, you know, analyst Ted Butler, who's now not with us, he testified as well. And obviously Andrew Maguire and others. And before he passed away, Bart Shilton did an interview with Chris Marcus and basically said that the decision not to pursue JP Morgan was a political decision. So having learnt about what happened in the American context, I was very conscious of the same potential risk happening here. And so in the first couple of months, having gone to ASIC, I wasn't getting the sort of reception I was expecting to get, because my barrister used to work at ASIC, and I hired a consultant who was a former ASIC senior executive. So I had people who had worked in the agency, people who have a track record of putting people in jail for corporate crime. And so they were the ones that reviewed my thorough investigation, and they said they've never seen anything of quite like this. I mean, no one actually spends $50,000 of their own money and spending 10 months to put their own investigation file together before going to ASIC. So, but you know, it's the way I sort of did it, and they thought that it was you know, quite remarkable about what I did. But when I gave it to ASIC, I was expecting them to bring me in and to ask questions, and they were giving me in initial stage the cold shoulder, and that sort of said to me there's something fundamentally wrong here, because in Australia, ASIC has a long history of being thoroughly deficient. So what I did then was, having spent 10 months on ABC Bullion and having learned the history of Andrew Maguire, I said to myself, I now need to turn the guns on the cops to keep the cops honest. And so in the course of 2022, I wrote a public report about ASIC's own operational performance using data from their government annual reports. In October 2022, I published a 70-page report, which got national headlines. So there's anyone could go into Google and type in ABC, as in the Australian Broadcasting Corporation, John Adams, ASIC, and you're going to find an article about my statistical analysis about their handling of reports of alleged misconduct. And so having my political connections in Parliament, I had gone months earlier and said to people in Parliament, I wanted an inquiry into ASIC because there's something fundamentally wrong with the cops. And so in late October 2022, the Australian Senate voted 43-20 to establish the inquiry. So, it's not particularly easy. And I'm sure even in the United States, it's not easy to just go to Congress and say, I want an investigation into a government agency. But that's basically what I did. I went and knocked on some doors in the Australian Senate in August of 2022, said, I'm working on a report. I want an inquiry. And by the end of October, 43 senators against 20 said we're going to give John Adams the inquiry. And that was a big political achievement to get the inquiry. And 21 months later, in July of this year, the inquiry concluded its report. And the chairman of the inquiry, Senator Andrew Bragg from New South Wales, basically said that ASIC was fundamentally broken because the inquiry had looked at many investigations, many case studies. So this wasn't just ABC Bullion. They looked at a lot of stuff. And they basically said systematic failure across the board, to the point that the inquiry report has called for the abolition of ASIC and to basically sack the entire leadership team and to reconstitute a new regulatory structure that has two agencies, not one. And just to give you, before we get back to ABC Bullion, just to give you a flavor, Rob, last year there was a staff survey at ASIC and 1,056 civil servants responded to the survey. These are the worst operational results I've ever seen in sort of my professional career. So on a scale of 0 to 100, do you know your job at ASIC? Role clarity, 26%. Motivation, 22%. Satisfaction, 18%. Intention to stay, 31%. And this is the killer. Organizational level quality. I kid you not, Rob. 1,056 civil servants ranked their own workplace at 2%. 2%. I mean, it's unprecedented that results could be absolutely this bad. And so now, in early, just to really, add to the point, in August of this year, I did a YouTube video with a guy called Robbie Barwick, who's a part of a small political party called the Citizens Party, and we spent an hour talking about systematic corruption in ASIC. And within 2 weeks of that video going public on YouTube, we get a letter, a handwritten letter on an official ASIC government envelope, addressed to me and Robbie, who is the other person we would have conversation with. And in the letter, in the envelope, is a handwritten note on official government stationery. And it basically says, Dear John Adams and Robbie, your videos are 100% spot on. And these are the videos about corruption. It is the worst it's ever been. And this person had been at ASIC for a long time. And it is worse than what you portray. So this is not a YouTube conspiracy. You have real people inside the regulator prepared to risk their career and risk their job to write me handwritten notes to say that the corruption is real. And it was a cry for help. And that was extraordinary. So, Senator Andrew Bragg in the Australian Senate in July said the culture was sick. The leadership team is deficient. And even the veterans at ASIC are basically saying that there's systematic corruption. So that's the backdrop of what I'm about to tell you in terms of this ABC Bullion investigation. So now let me ask, and Rob, I'm glad I'm asking you this question because you're an auditor. Mm-hmm. So let me just ask you this. This is not a trick question. If I said to you, Rob, that gold and silver was physically missing and the allegation was fraud, as an auditor or law enforcement, how long would you expect law enforcement, for example, just say the CFTC or the FBI, just say you went to the FBI and said, hypothetically, a business in America is running a fractional reserve allocated program, and people's investors' money is missing. How long would you expect FBI to take before they would physically go look to see if the gold and silver was missing or not?
I'd imagine, inquiries that they have to make, channels have to go through, maybe a few days a week, something like that. I want to say one thing before you answer. I wish the CFTC would investigate what's going on in America, because I think we may have similar corruption. They don't really, and I talked to the guy that used to do a lot of the investigations at a conference a couple of years ago on camera, and the CFTC has had, at the time he left, 12 investigators for 1,000 exchange traded products. He says they would probably need 1,000 along with the data they collected. So the CFTC wouldn't have the capability of investigating here in America because they don't have the people to do it. It doesn't surprise me, I guess, knowing that, and in my audit career, seeing, a lot of these things here in the U.S. in terms of the corruption in corporates. None of what you're telling me, I guess, really surprised me. It's kind of sad to hear, but it doesn't surprise me. But getting back to your question, I would not assume more than a week. I mean, if it were something serious with a pretty good dollar amount in a regulated industry, the investigator should jump right on it. They should make inquiries right away. They should make requests. And I don't know what the policy would be for the CFTC to investigate or for the FBI, but I would assume it would be fairly quick.
Okay, so that's the natural answer that one would expect in this circumstance. So here's the question: how long do you think it took ASIC to physically leave the office to go physically look for the gold and silver?
I'm guessing you're gonna tell me it's a lot longer than that, if at all.
9.5 months. 9.5 months. Just an unbelievable, extraordinary amount of time. And but here's where it becomes surreal. Now, in the 9.5-month period, during a criminal investigation, and the reason why I say it's a criminal investigation, Rob. So I've done many FOIA requests over the last probably 16, 17 months. And I've obtained a lot of records from ASIC about what they did in the investigation. So the scope of the investigation was to investigate what they call Section 180 to 184 of the Corporations Act. And Section 184 is criminal offenses as a company director. So this was a legitimate criminal investigation. But during an official criminal investigation by ASIC, the federal corporate regulator, who came and publicly endorsed ABC Bullion? Have a guess.
Who was it, John?
The Australian Prime Minister. The current Prime Minister of Australia. The current Prime Minister of Australia, Anthony Albanese, on the 14th of October 2022. It wasn't just a photo op, Rob. It wasn't just a by chance encounter. It was a pre-scheduled national press conference in which he stood shoulder to shoulder with ABC Bullion during a live criminal investigation and gave an explicit endorsement of the company and the families behind the company.
Oh, wow.
I'm telling you, Rob, this has never happened before in Australian history. It's just an unprecedented situation. And when I've tried to raise this situation in the mainstream media behind closed doors or in Parliament, people say to me, well, maybe the Prime Minister wasn't aware that there was a live criminal investigation on foot. The issue here, Rob, is that the Australian Taxation Office has gone after the same people for over a decade over allegations of carousel tax fraud schemes. And all that information is on the public record. So having worked in Parliament, having I've got connections at the highest levels in Australian politics. When you're at that level of Prime Minister or Leader of the Opposition, you have to be super careful if you're doing any public events as to who you associate with, and you require your own staff to vet. It's just like a presidential visit. The Secret Service, but also the president's staff would vet any campaign stuff. We're only 2 weeks away from the US election. So if Donald Trump or Kamala Harris is doing a campaign stop, they obviously want to make sure where they're going. Is it legal? Is it illegal? Who are these people? Is it legitimate? All that sort of background has to be done because you don't want to put the leader of your nation in a compromising position. And so who knows what vetting they did or didn't do, but the Prime Minister held a press conference during a live criminal investigation and endorsed ABC Bullion. Wow. Now the question then becomes so where was the bullion? Now, here's what I was able to uncover. Actually, so after the investigation happened, 13 months, a $300,000 investigation of cost. And I get a letter last year from ASIC, and it was sent to my legal team as well. It said, after a thorough investigation, we find no evidence of a crime. But I still had this nagging feeling as well. I didn't know where the gold and silver was. So where was it? Because that was the great mystery. And that's why Rob, I actually went to ASIC, because I wanted them to use a search warrant to actually go find it. Now, just so you get a bit of a sense as to how easy this investigation could have been. ASIC's office in Sydney in the CBD is on a street called Market Street, and ABC Bullion's old office was literally 500 meters away. So this is all that had to happen. The investigators draft a search warrant. They literally walk 500 meters. They go to ABC Bullion and issue them a legal notice. So they have what they call forthwith powers. So you can present a legal notice and say, I need this information right now. You must tell me, because I am empowered by the law, and you got to tell me right now. That's all they had to do. Walk down 500 meters. Where's the vault? Give me the address. They go back to the office. They write the address in the search warrant application, file it in the court, and they could be in that day, if not the next day. That's all that had to happen. And this was not a 13-month investigation. This is literally 24-hour, 72-hour investigation to get to the bottom of what this is. And that's how easy this whole thing could have been. And that's how corrupt and incompetent these people are. But so what happened? So on the 4th of July, 2022, the investigation starts officially. Now, on the 7th of July, so 3 days on, the company, ABC Bullion, is notified they're under investigation. And they're notified by the issuance of what they call a Section 30 notice, which is the production of books and records. Now, so the issue here, Rob, is in a commodity fraud investigation, the most critical piece of evidence is the commodity itself. So the way they actually did this investigation was they got documents, they interviewed people, and the last thing they looked at was the commodity. But in a commodity fraud investigation, the first thing you should go preserve is the evidence of the commodity and the state in which the commodity is in, and then go look at documentation and people afterwards. Because had they looked at a search warrant at the very beginning, they would have, I think, found a very different answer compared to waiting 9.5 months. And obviously, you being an auditor, if you were conducting an audit of a business with a physical product, gold, silver, or whatever, and you give them 9.5 months, well, 9.5 months is plenty of time to alter the state of the physical evidence. And now, what happened in the 9.5 months? Now, in 2021, I found a former ABC Bullion manager who was only there for a short amount of time. He told me he was told there was there's the location in Sydney at 74 Castlereagh Street. And in this location was a fake door. Behind the fake door was a private vault, 10 meters by 10 meters, so 100 square meters. And in this 100 square meter room was company inventory and client metal. And that's where the storage program was. Now, when this person told me this, I said, did you ever see it? He goes, no, it was restricted access, but that's what he was told. Now, last year, I was able to get into that location, and there is a fake door. And when I was there, the fake door was open. I walked into the room. It's a super tiny room, 21 square meters at best. So in July of 2022, there was some gold and silver in that room. And then what they did was on the 7th of July, they're told that they're under investigation. On the 31st of July, according to the current general manager of ABC Bullion, Jordan Alicio, they moved the metal from that small room to a large building in a different part of Sydney. Now, in their explanation, they said they had bullion in multiple locations, and they moved all of that gold and silver to this large building. Now, the problem with this large building is it was illegally occupied. The building had been leased in May of 2021. And they had to, so they were in New South Wales. If you're going to use a building, you need to get approval for what they call change of use. And then if you're doing a redevelopment, you have to go through a legal process of consent from the local government. You have to, get a construction certificate. You have to appoint what they call a principal certifying authority, do the construction, and then basically get all of the compliance certificates what they call a final fire safety certificate. And then once you complete that process, the last part of the piece is the occupation certificate. And occupation certificates would be very common in the United States. I'm not saying anything quite unique. But in July of 2022, did they have an occupation certificate which gave them legal consent to use the building? The answer is no. When did they get an occupation certificate? They got a partial occupation certificate in August of this year, once the scandal was exposed by Michael West Media. And your listeners can Google Michael West Media and ABC Bullion, and they're going to see 3 major articles that have been published over the last 2 months where we expose this whole scandal. So the movement of the metal to this illegal building, to this building, was illegal under state law, and ASIC, the federal cops, basically signed it all off. And so that's the first part of it. Is so the question you got to ask yourself is, so whose decision was it to move the bullion? The managing director of ABC Bullion, a woman called Jane Simpson. So why would Miss Simpson, 3 weeks into a criminal investigation where she is directly being investigated because she's the managing director, and this was
almost like you can't make this up, John. The more you go into this, I'm incredulous. It's like a bad spy movie.
Well, here's the thing, Rob. I mean, I'm giving you, a short summary, but obviously, it took me months and months to get the evidence to actually piece this together. And so, there's been threats in the last 2 months of litigation in the courts, defamation, injurious falsehood, but nothing's been filed in court against me or Michael West Media because they know we can prove this. We have all the documents. And so the question you've got to ask yourself is, why, if the storage program was legitimate, why would Miss Simpson order bullion to be moved from a legal place to an illegal place in which the investors were never told their bullion was moved? Why would she do that? I say illegal cover-up. ASIC says, well, I mean, look, we don't know what ASIC says. ASIC's actually before Parliament in the next 2 weeks, and they're going to be receiving some questions about this whole situation. So that's what happened. That's the first part of the scandal. But there's a second part. And the second part is the audit process. And obviously, you being an auditor, this is what I'm very interested in your reaction about what I'm about to tell you. So one of the lawyers who I hired, so I hired a number of lawyers to do a number of different things for me. I hired a lawyer who worked at ASIC from 2020 to 2022, and she was in what they call the Office of Enforcement. So she had been in private practice for about 8 years prior, and then she joined the regulator, and then she hated the culture, and she left after 2 years. But she worked on a number of major investigations. So when I hired her and we got talking about her experience at the regulator, so I said, well, if you need a subject matter expert, or if you need expert evidence in order for court proceedings, how long would it take you to appoint an expert? And she said, in her experience, within days, or probably, maybe by the end of the week, you should be able to find an expert to hire, even in the case of an auditor, to be able to hire the auditor to do an emergency audit. Under the Commonwealth procurement rules, federal institutions have the ability to hire people at quick notice if there is legitimate public interest reasons for why you need to just call someone up and hire them without going through a proper procurement process. So they had all the legal power to just pick up the phone and say to one of the big four companies, we need you to come in today and we need to do an audit quite urgently. But so what ended up happening? They did an open tender for an audit. They got 2 responses, one from EY, one from Deloitte. So the investigation starts in July. The Deloitte proposal didn't hit their desk until November, and then they basically didn't sign the contract with Deloitte for 3 months. So they didn't sign the contract until February of 2023. And in this process of November 2022 to February 2023, they kept on changing the scope of the work of the forensic audit. And so Deloitte was required to present 3 different proposals before the process before the contract was signed. Now, in January of 2023, ASIC had developed an assurance plan that they wanted to use as the basis for the audit. Now, we have an email which is highly incriminating. ASIC met with ABC Bullion and presented. So this is what the email implies. They provided a copy of a redacted assurance plan to ABC Bullion. So now they were not prepared to use a search warrant or get a search warrant. So in order to access the physical locations to conduct the audit, they needed ABC Bullion's permission, legal permission to enter their premises. Now, if they've got a search warrant, the evidence we had, no magistrate in Australia would have denied them a search warrant. They could have got a search warrant very easily. And I've got people who used to work at ASIC that said that the evidence was overwhelming, that a magistrate would have provided law enforcement with a search warrant. So this process was highly unusual and it was not necessary. But they get their consent to go into their premises, and then they hire Deloitte. So in January, February, and March of 2023, last year, there was multiple meetings between ASIC and ABC Bullion. And here's the ridiculous thing. So we have a system in Australia around police checks. And basically, ABC Bullion told ASIC that if Deloitte's going to come out on our premises, everyone has to have a police check, and we need to make sure that no one has a criminal record. Now, here's the thing. Some of the places they accessed was ABC Bullion's retail stores. Customers can walk in without a police check, and they do business on a daily basis. So, I mean, in this course of events, law enforcement should have said, "We're coming in. If you're not going to give us permission, we're going to get a court order, and we're just going to walk in. We're not going to waste our time with national police checks or anything like that." But they did things like that. But here's the thing: this is where another big scandal is, the audit methodology. So the allegation was fractional reserve scheme. Not all the gold and silver was there. So, but what they did was they didn't. So, if you want to do an audit, count all the metal. Did they do that? They didn't do that. They used what they call a random stock selection process. So basically, imagine you've got 100 bars. They picked 10 bars and checked them. Obviously they had records from ABC Bullion, but they checked some of the bars. And part of what the checking was around the quality of the product. So in terms of the weight, the gold and silver content, and it's like my central allegation was about the quality of the product. Now, a new whistleblower has emerged that has expressed some concerns about the quality of the product, but that wasn't my central concern. The central concern was not enough bullion in storage, but they didn't count all the bullion. And when this was brought to their attention earlier this year in a private meeting in Parliament, a senator asked, "Well, why didn't you count all the bullion?" The reason was we didn't have the budget to count it all, which is a complete joke. They absolutely had the budget for it. So I don't accept that at all. But they do a random stock selection process. And this is what I would describe. The ASIC effectively coached ABC Bullion to pass the audit. So they basically said, "We're going to do an audit. We're coming. This was conversations over about 3.5 months. And just to be sure that ABC Bullion was fully prepared for this audit process, 10 days before, so there's 4 site inspections. Before the first site inspection, ASIC provides a explicit notice to ABC Bullion to say, "We're coming to the first site inspection at this location on the 28th of April, 2023. Be ready." And I'm thinking to myself, how much help do you have to give the Prime Minister's friends? Not only do you tell them there's an audit, not only do you basically spend months getting them ready for the audit, but you then tell them 10 days out, "We are coming on this day, on the first day, be ready." And now here's the thing. In this 10-day period of late April 2023, a new whistleblower has emerged that basically said, who didn't know that ABC Bullion was under investigation. And what that person basically said was that he was ordered and again, this was a very unusual request. He never saw this in his career at ABC Bullion, and he no longer works there, but he was told to drop everything and to pack as much gold and silver as possible. And this was an office not in New South Wales, and to ship it back to New South Wales within 24 hours. It made no commercial sense, but he had heard rumors of a audit pending. Something big was happening inside the company, which he wasn't privy to. And there was some concerns about whether they had sufficient gold and silver in the storage program prior to the audit. So the audit sample, or so the state of the bullion when it before the audit took place was altered during this 10-day period, so that when Deloitte walked in, it got the tick. And I'm thinking to myself, well, why would taxpayers pay $136,000 to Deloitte when this is just an absolutely shambolic audit process from my point of view? But yeah, I mean, but now look, I'm going to pause here, Rob, because I think given your audit history in the United States, I'm fascinated. I think your audience would be fascinated to know that as an auditor, given what I've just described to you, does this sound like a legitimate audit methodology and process, or this is, I mean, would you run an audit like this, or would you do it differently?
Well, in a typical audit, if you're doing like a paper audit, like accounts, which is all through computer systems, or it's not a physical product, you would do a series of IT general control checks, making sure that systems were working properly, access is restricted, and then any amounts between systems were transferred properly using control headers and things like that. And then, in addition, you would have a CPA or just a seasoned financial auditor take a look at those accounts. They may sample, they may do full. It depends upon the risk of the size of the amount of that particular account. So there's a whole list of rules. And in fact, for financial statement purposes, Sarbanes-Oxley, there's a test as to the size of the account, the relationship to the company versus how much work you have to do. And they're very explicit procedures and instructions. And when you get to a physical count, if there has not been a history of issues, you can use a sampling methodology. However, if any of your sample, and usually it's 25%, and if any of that sample doesn't look correct, and you use a completely random number generator, at that point, you do a deeper dive. Now, that's on a trusted basis. If there's any suspicion whatsoever that inventories may be incorrect, I mean, you always have the license to audit 100%, especially of a physical product. So for example, I've audited data tapes. This is something I used to do a long time ago. And you would audit a sample, but if you did not feel comfortable, and it'd be at least 25%, but you've also checked other things along the way. If there were any history, any inkling that something was wrong, you may run a physical audit. You may do it 2 or 3 times. I remember being on a project, I was actually overseas, analyzing a physical product for an audit. I can't describe what it was, standard process. And the paper part of the audit where I was looking at the control totals, I couldn't get to match. I went in and we checked everything, and there were big issues. And what had happened was the items were there, they were in the wrong place. So you have the right as an auditor. First, you're going to do a lot of prep work before you touch the physical product. Then you're going to touch the physical product, and you have the right to audit as much as you want. If there's even a slight thought that there could be a discrepancy, or if you've never audited before, if it's a first-time audit, I mean, you're going to do every procedure that you need to do, because especially in the United States, if you're doing a financial statement or anything along those lines, it's going to be government regulatory. Somebody's signing off on that. And that not only is that company responsible for the results of that audit, the individual is also under some of the regulations like Sarbanes-Oxley can have personal responsibility. So a lot of it depends upon your pre-work. A lot of it depends upon the history of, but in this particular case, for Deloitte to come in and do a small sample audit is preposterous. You know, I don't know what decision-making was there at Deloitte. I know Deloitte auditors. I know Ernst & Young, KPMG, Price Waters. And if the basis of the audit is to confirm something that somebody's alleged is not there, you're going to do a full spec audit. And if there are serial numbers on bars, you're confirming serial numbers. And if any one of those serial numbers is off, you then go back and do a chain of custody investigation and say, why is that off? Why is that serial number different? Who substituted, and under what procedure did you do it? So, you know, it depends upon how comfortable you are and what type of audit you're doing. But generally, if you're doing a physical product, and there's any concerns in your pre-work, and it's extensive pre-work, then you're checking everything. And if anything does not follow policy, or if anything does not match, you're diving deeper, and you're going back to the process itself, and you're going back and you're interviewing the people over that process saying, Why is there a discrepancy? What's the issue? And I've seen, especially early in my audit career when Sarbanes-Oxley first came out in 2004, I was a first-year auditor. I was sitting at an insurance client, and I saw my partner from KPMG come in, and I saw, I think it was either the comptroller or CFO, if I remember correctly, this insurance company come in, and they had a battle royale in the audit room at the company location over a single account, and KPMG threatened to walk off and report to the government they had an issue. So if the auditors are doing their jobs, you don't allow any discrepancies because your reputation's on the line of your firm. And if the regulators find out you did not do the audit correctly, that audit firm can be held liable. And one more thing, the audit firms get audited by a rival audit firm, and they can be audited by the SEC as well in the case of like financial statements. So the auditors get audited, the SEC and the PCAOB have the right to audit, and you have very specific procedures about how you're doing the audit itself. So
I see.
the way that you're describing it just sounds like it's not sufficient at all.
Absolutely. Now, one question I'm interested to dive into with you is that when you were an auditor at EY, were you, I'm assuming your clients were private companies. I mean, did you ever, because you know, one of the key distinctions here, and this is where I just want to make sure about if I've got my assumption correct here. So this was not an audit instigated by ABC Bullion. This was an audit instigated by law enforcement for potentially the purposes of bringing a criminal or civil case to court.
No, you're not only are you looking at all the stock, I would imagine they would do a full book review. They would interview anybody in and around the process. I have seen government officials actually go to the auditors and question them 2 years later about their audit process. So I don't understand the process that was used there. It doesn't seem adequate at all, given the allegations and given how that audit was instantiated. And Deloitte, if Deloitte is being retained to do an audit from a regulatory agency under the thought that there could have been some malfeasance or some sort of discrepancy, and Deloitte does not do a full boat audit and interview everybody in that process and look at the books and examine policy procedure, all controls, then Deloitte did not exercise what we would call due care. And Deloitte should have been investigated as to why they did not do that, or at least in the United States, I believe that would be the case.
Sure. And the one thing I'll say is that, so there was 4 site inspections as part of this audit. And one of the site inspections was this building, which was the illegal building. So the reason why there was 4, so there was some of the retail stores that they wanted to look at. They went to this illegally occupied building to look at the storage program. But the other thing they looked at was ABC Bullion's pull allocated product, and their pull allocated, because ABC Bullion have a sister company called ABC Refinery. So the investor funds that are in the pull allocated product are used to acquire gold and silver that is then used in the manufacturing process. So that one of the site inspections was at the refinery. So again, so whether Deloitte knows it or not, they actually went to an illegally occupied building and signed off on an illegal storage program.
Now that's a huge red flag. First of all, if it's not an approved building, that's a chain of custody issue right off the bat. At that point, you fail the audit, and then the investigation should begin. Why is it at that location?
Well, 100%. But here's the thing. Now, can I say, Rob, is that so Deloitte produced a 41-page report, which was delivered to ASIC, I think, on the 24th of July, 2023. Parliament has asked for a copy of the report, and ASIC has said to Parliament, they've claimed what they call public interest immunity. It is against the public interest for Parliament to see the Deloitte report. So no one has seen the I kid you not, Rob. No one has seen the report. So and again, until I started making this public, no one knew that ABC Bullion was ever under investigation. No one ever knew that Deloitte had done the audit or there's an audit report. But now that we're talking about this publicly, even if they publish the report, now that I have a whistleblower that is basically saying that the audit was manipulated, I don't trust the numbers. Now, here's the other amazing thing that happened is that we had, so this second whistleblower who helped me in my most recent investigation, we prepared a 23-page new whistleblower statement for the second whistleblower. When I went to ASIC in June of this year with my 200-page critical review of their first investigation, they were prepared to talk to the second whistleblower. But when the second whistleblower basically said, if I'm going to talk to you, I want a recording of our conversation. I want a transcript to protect my legal position. At that point, ASIC said, we're not going to talk to you. So they basically said, as long as there's no record of what we're saying to each other, we'll talk to you. But as soon as this second whistleblower says, I want a record of our conversation for legal purposes, they said, we refuse to consider your evidence. We refuse to talk to you at all.
Wow.
This is how blatant the corruption in Australia is. And so again, just to, when we talk about, Epstein or Hunter Biden, something like this, I've knocked on a lot of doors in the media and parliament. I mean, to get traction on this story, it's been very difficult. I have found, a media outlet that has been prepared to put some of these things in writing. And so we have some articles published there, but it's really now up to, people in the alternative media to bring this story to light so that we can actually expose how bad corruption in this country is. And there's a lot of investors who are associated with ABC Bullion who just have absolutely no idea what's been happening for the last few years. And that's why I've decided to now come publicly and speak on many channels on multiple platforms. So we inform people around the world about counterparty risk and how risky it is to do business with a bullion dealer who's not fully transparent and who have staff who are openly confessing to fraud. And so, I have a little operation in terms of Adams Bullion, but, my business partner and the staff we have, we are very clear about, our ethical obligations to our customers. And having gone through this process and learned so much about it, it's been one hell of an education. To be honest, Rob, in 2021, I thought I knew about bullion, but once you get into the law, evidence, collecting statements, and actually piecing together what an investigation looks like, my knowledge on this whole subject has increased in leaps and bounds. And probably I'll write a book at some point and provide all of my the lessons learned in some sort of written form, so investors around the world will be able to learn what exactly they should be looking for when they're dealing with a bullion dealer and actually buying gold, silver in terms of counterparty risk. So,
that book should become a case study in a lot of financial classes, not only for auditors, but for financial professionals. Because if the Harvard case study method, if you have a study like this, it's talking about all of the issues, that should be a teaching tool for people on what to look out for. And that is a lot of what you do as an auditor. You take past experience, you take past precedent, and you say, okay, in this situation, this is what we've seen in the past. That's the first thing you look for. If you had a case in the past or multiple cases in the past of a certain type of issue or malfeasance or corruption, that's the first thing you look for. And so if you do document that in a book, John, you should consider approaching colleges and approaching programs to take that in and use that as a case study. That's the best teaching tool for young, financial professionals.
Yes. Now, one critical thing to say is last year, ASIC wrote me and my legal team a letter saying that that we're taking no action on the basis we can't find any evidence of a crime.
Mm-hmm.
This year, when I handed my new report and I exposed the illegal building and the shambolic audit process and the manipulation of the audit sample, they said, we're not doing anything. I get a letter in August saying, basically go away, but they didn't provide me a reason. So last year, there was no evidence. Now that I have the evidence, they just haven't provided a reason at all. And in 2 weeks, ASIC is before Parliament, and there'll be some questions about these various particular issues. And I'm very interested to see what they say, but I'm convinced that I'm a victim of government corruption, that this goes all the way to the top. And any legitimate investigation would have been able to expose this and actually enforce the law. And it's just, and I was on a program a couple of days ago with 𝙁𝙍𝙀𝙀, and I think the BICS just published it this morning. I mean, BICS has talked about multiple situations in the precious metal market in the United States where certain people have been allowed to get away with malfeasance. And
US
the
Mint, I
same,
think it did a series on the US Mint and the American Eagle and
yes,
how they're producing that and then moving customers to higher premium products. Everybody should go watch that video. They actually interviewed the gentleman who still worked at the Mint, who was, I essentially was whistleblowing to BIX about their legal responsibilities towards that program, what they were actually doing. Everybody should go watch Big Swear's channel on that. And I know he's done other investigations as well.
yeah, yeah. So it's a massive issue in the Western world. But yeah, it's been one hell of a journey. And so, but yeah, no, but the moral, but I guess the key issue for me going forward is that well, there's still likely to be some form of litigation against ABC Bullion, I suspect, in terms of storage fees and potentially misappropriation of investor capital. But and we'll see where that takes us. But the big issue that I've learned from this process is we have a parliamentary report saying that the regulator is fundamentally broken. The culture is sick. I have whistleblowers from within the government saying that the corruption is real. And for the sake of my country, we have to now engage in the political process to reform the regulator. And these people at the top have to go because, taxpayers are not paying public servants to spend $300,000 in 13 months on something that could have been solved within 1 day. It was a very simple investigation operation to do, because I basically had done all the work over the 10 months. So I basically had given them a comprehensive file of what they needed to know and and we actually provided them. Not only did we provide them with a complaint with 103 exhibits of evidence, we actually I actually put together an investigation plan. And I said, if you're going to conduct an investigation, so one of the consultants who helped me prepare my complaints in 2022, I told him that I'm designing an investigation plan because gold and silver wouldn't be ASIC doesn't have a lot of expertise in commodity fraud investigations. So I thought I'd give them a bit of a cheat sheet of what they should be looking for and what sort of evidence they should go collect as part of the investigation. And when I showed it to my consultant, he thought this was a great suggestion. And so we actually said to them, this is what you need to go look for. And if you go look for these things, I'm sure you're going to find the crime. And I have a lot of documentation from ASIC about some of the stuff they did, but a lot of the critical information has been redacted. And they've used federal law as the basis for why certain things can't be shown to me via FOIA request. And so there's still some gaps in my knowledge. But from the things that I've been able to piece together, which again took quite a bit of time to not only get the evidence, but for example, understanding the law, the legal process, and even about this building, I had to spend months learning the law, the legal process, finding the right type of lawyers that can provide me specialized legal advice so that we could make sure that we have a solid case. And so, I'm talking about this here. I'm not fearful of any form of litigation from ABC Bullion because they know that I have done the work. I have all the information, and that if there was any court case, I'd be able to defend myself because I've done the work. But
yeah, you got the receipt. You got the receipts, John, and knowing, some of the conversations we've had along the way, and I know that you didn't share a lot along the way, but I know even some of the early conversations we had when you started doing this, I knew that you were going to be very thorough in this, and I'm glad that you were, because when you look at the Perth Mint, when you look at ABC, when you look at some alleged things going on in the American COMEX, when you look at SLV and GLD, those ETF funds, and how their prospectuses are written about the metal, not only redemption, but when they're required to have it, I anticipate that some of the problems that you've seen are endemic across the rest of the market. And it really goes to show that you need independent auditors, you need regulators that have teeth. Our regulatory agencies around the commodities market, including gold and silver in the United States, were established in the early 70s. We have not had additional legislation providing enough funding, enough oversight, enough proper procedure to allow our regulator to regulate the industry. CFTC basically has no teeth. There's a report from Jerry Markin, who's a lawyer and professor at FIU, who's written about the commodities industry for a very long time. He has a report out there about commodities manipulation, the unprosecutable crime, which is available at FIU under his bibliography if anybody wants to look it up. I think across the Western world, there have been issues with manipulation in gold, silver, the rest of the commodities complex, in which we don't have an updated Sarbanes-Oxley or that type of regulation, which allows periodic independent audits of these entities and of these processes, and enforces those to be made public. First of all, the company or the entity, whether it be the Perth Mint, I guess the quasi-governmental, or ABC, public or private doesn't matter. There should be a regulatory requirement for them to do independent assessments and then pay for them. And further, that the regulators go in periodically and also do their own assessments and also have the teeth to censure or whatever they need to do to penalize these companies. And all of these investigations should be made public in the interest of the people, as you will identify with. So that's what really needs to happen, not only across commodities, across all financial sectors, but specifically commodities. Commodities seems to be the one in the Western world where we have really weak regulatory controls, and it's something that really does need to change.
Yeah. I mean, look, and just to highlight that point, one of the things that I learned in 2021, 2022 is the law that the Corporations Act 2001 regulates companies, but also investment, has a whole section about financial products and investment products, etc. So Chapter 7 of the Corporations Act looked at financial products, financial services, businesses, etc. Section 763C of the Corporations Act explicitly says bullion is not a financial product. So Chapter 7 of the Act provides a number of legal protections, requires federal licensing, has a whole compliance regime. So if you're in Australia and you're buying stocks, bonds, mutual funds, ETFs, etc., it's all regulated by Chapter 7. The one thing that's not regulated is physical gold and silver. And that's why in Australia, the gold and silver industry is largely the Wild West. And you do have some ethical players, but you do have some very dark secrets that have been roaming around for a very long time. And that's because the regulatory structure around this industry is enormously absent in my country. And we don't actually, at least in the United States, you have a CFTC, you have a commodities regulator. We don't have a commodities regulator in Australia at all. So a lot of this activity is largely unpunished, uninvestigated, and yet people have been doing shady things for a very long time, and they thought they could get away with it until certain people were prepared to tell me stuff, and that was enough for me to say, well, I want to do something about it. And here we are 3.5 years later.
Well, thank you, John, for doing that. We're going to go ahead and wrap this up because it's about an hour. We can always do a follow-up as you learn more. Like if there are next steps, if anything breaks out there in Australia that you want to share, please come back on the program and let us know. But I appreciate you coming on and telling the story. And I really appreciate you spending your own money doing this, because I think what people need to understand is you put your own money, time, and effort into this. And this type of investigation isn't just for Australia. It's for the entire system, for us to take a look at the entire system. And this is the type of investigation that we need, the Perth Mint, ABC, all of these types of things to expose this, because if it's going on in Australia, it could be going on somewhere else, and everybody needs to be aware. And that's the only way that investors that are putting money into these types of schemes and products, are going to feel safe. And I think that if you're out there and you're looking for a place to store your bullion, you want a company that does independent audits and that provides that information and provides public assurance to their account holders that they have what they say they have.
Yes. Well, look, I'll just make one final point, Rob, is that, I'd like to come back soon and actually provide a bit of a point-by-point series of red flags to investors, because having gone through this process, look, I've been able to pick up a number of red flags that just make no sense. And I was just amazed that investors have been operating in the market for so long, and they just didn't pick up obvious concerning signs. And so I've got a bit of a list of red flags that we can come back the next time and say that no matter where you are, Europe, UK, United States, Australia, if you are dealing with a bullion dealer and you see these types of red flags, run to the hills.
Yeah, definitely. We'll do that. Thank you, John, so much. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Rob.
Oh, real quick, since you run a bullion company in Australia, for the people that are watching out in Australia, why don't you give us information if people need to contact you or want to contact you about your products?
Sure. So if people are wanting to do business with me, they can contact, look up adamsbullion.com. We're based in Melbourne. They can email us at info@adamsbullion.com. Or I have another email address, john@adamseconomics.com as well. But I'm all over social media as well, Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, Telegram. So people should be able to find me and then contact me if they want to talk more.
Okay, thank you so much, John. Appreciate it.
Thank you.